good morning, and good afternoon, and good evening to in-house counsel and in-house legal professionals from all across North America and the world. Shout out Chicago. Welcome to In-House Connect. My name is Shai Mahani. I'm the CEO and co-founder of In-House Connect. Thank you for spending your breakfast time or your lunchtime with us, and special thanks to our wonderful sponsor, LawView, and our fantastic presenters today, who are Ashley Bass and Bob Kanapka, who are going to talk about mastering matter management for in-house legal, 5 steps to smarter legal workflows. This is our 19th event of the year, and I'm wondering if you're here for the first time or if you've tuned in to an IHC webinar before. Shout out Morristown, New Jersey. It's close to Park. Thank you for joining. Okay, let's get to today's program, Mastering Matter Management for In-House Legal, 5 Steps to Smarter Legal Workflows. We have a rock star panel featuring Ashley Bash and Bob Kanapka. Bob is currently the Assistant General Counsel at Dun & Bradstreet, where he has been part of the legal department for 15 years, overseeing legal operations, IP strategy, and North American sales and partnership contracts. Bob is an advocate of learning and using legal technology to improve the speed, convenience, and trackability of legal services. He is joined by Ashley Bass. Ashley is Vice President of Product Marketing at LawView, with 15 years of experience delivering business-to-business technology across multiple domains, including analytics and data visualization and productivity and collaboration tools for corporate teams. She's passionate about helping in-house legal teams identify, implement, and reap the benefits of technology to become more efficient, data-driven, and impactful. Really, I get to see the slides in advance. I know what's coming, and I am psyched for this program. So, without further ado, I'll turn things over to Ashley to get us started.
Awesome. Thanks. Hi, everyone. It sounds cold in North America. I'm in the Southern Hemisphere. I might be the only one on the call. It is summertime here. Great to see everybody posting. I see we've got a few LawView folks, customers on the chat as well. So love to see you all chat and engage in the polls. Just ask any questions as we go along. We've got a lot of great content. So I'm just going to get started. My role is super simple. It's really to put Bob on the spot and have him answer all the questions. He's our expert in residence. And that's why he's joined us today, because we're really going to talk about how he and his team have used technology to improve speed, convenience, and trackability of legal services. Let me just make sure my slides are working. So our objective today is to explore and educate in these 5 areas. So we'll start with the fundamentals of effective matter management. We'll talk about evaluating and implementing technology solutions and how to think about the process improvement and change management that go along with that, how to get the most from technology solutions, and we'll also talk about leveraging data and reporting for impact. So not all in this order. Bob's got a lot of great insights. We've set up what I hope is a really great program. Do feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go along, and we'll address them if it makes sense, and hopefully be able to leave a little bit of time at the end for a short Q&A as well. So the reason I'm here is because I'm on the team at LawView, and thanks again for those customers who are joining. We are a provider of in-house matter management legal tech. Our mission is to accelerate the world's legal work by helping in-house teams, and our product is called the LawView Legal Workspace. But the core of the legal workspace is matter management capability. So it has the option for CLM and e-billing, but it really starts for us with matter management. And we recently published a guide around improving matter management. It's a buyer's guide to help people find the best legal tech for them. So it's not all about LawView. It's a lot of great tips and tricks for matter management technology in general. So if you're interested in getting that guide, we'll be sending it out after, or you can copy the QR code there. So hopefully, whether you're investing in LawView or evaluating or using other kinds of legal tech or creating your own internal systems, the tips that we go through today will help you improve your approach to matter management. So we're going to start with a poll before I hand over to Bob. And just let us know what's most interesting to you about this session. Are you thinking about investing in matter management technology? Do you have something in-house already that you want to optimize? Are you just getting started, new to the legal ops function, building out a team, interested in becoming more data-driven? All of those things, any of those things? An even split right now across, yeah, so really interesting. Some people are looking for tech, some people have tech. A lot of people, I guess the front runner right now is data. That's a big hot topic, and Bob will talk a bit about how they're approaching it. A slim majority of people who are just getting started establishing a new function or just getting started with legal operations. Hopefully, we can speak to all of these things today. Okay, Bob, we're going to get started. I know Shai gave you an introduction, but if you could just briefly talk with us about the Dun& Bradstreet legal team and what your approach to matter management looks like today.
Absolutely. And thanks again, Shai, for having me here. Our legal department is about 105 people globally. We've got about 60 attorneys and 45 professional staff. We are broken up around the world. We've got about 45% of those people in North America, and then 35% in Europe, and 10% each in India and China. Functionally, we have four main teams. We have a commercial contracts team, we have a litigation and employment team, we have a regulatory compliance and ethics team, and we have a corporate governance team. The legal team has grown quite a bit over the last 10 years. When I started in 2010, it was about 20 people, and now we're at over 100.
A lot of growth in the team. And can you just say a little bit about how you think about your role as a legal ops leader across that journey? I know you're not only the AGC, but you're also now officially moved into a role as having a legal operations title. So specifically, why has technology become a really important part of your role at D&B, and how have you thought about approaching that operations side of leadership?
Yeah, and I'm new to the kind of full formal legal operations role. I feel like my journey might be similar to other people. So I was thinking I could go into the steps that I took, because it's not always a sort of straight path to leading or even being involved in legal operations. For me, it was very much about patience and opportunism, and trying to find the things that were complex, the things that were slowing the business down, and then jumping into those areas to try to make improvements. So you have to look externally for where those opportunities are. You can't just always have your own path, or even if you have your own plan and vision for your career, you have to be willing to pivot and take the opportunities as they come. I started with kind of a typical law firm apprenticeship, 7 years of doing cross-reference checking of loan agreements, decided that wasn't for me. So I went in-house to Dun & Bradstreet. There, I was an individual contributor contracts negotiator, enjoyed that work, did that for a few years, and then got the opportunity to manage the team of contract negotiators. And so that was my first opportunity to say, we're not really managing our workload. We don't have visibility into our workload. We don't know who's working on what. We don't really have the ability to have people step in when people either leave the business or take a long leave of absence or things like that. So that was my first opportunity to try. In that case, I used a hack to use Microsoft Outlook and their tasks function to basically just start categorizing the work that would come into a legal mailbox. So that was not a very high-tech solution, but it was the first place where we could start to use data to understand what we were working on as a team. From there, I had opportunities to look at NDA process, was the next sort of legal tech experience that I had, where we were having a backlog in NDAs. Our sales team said, is there a way to make this faster? We looked at some solutions. We found one called LogGeeks that offered their AI-driven review, and we used that to dramatically speed up the NDA process. So that was the first time we looked to an outside vendor to say, can we improve this process using legal technology? From there, our company, Dun & Bradstreet, was acquired in 2020. Our new general counsel, there were a lot of opportunities to both manage contracts better and matters better, used an AI tool to extract data, and then uploaded the metadata into a CLM. That was like my first real large scale legal ops project, where it took many months and a lot of coordination with 2 vendors and internal resources to make that work. Those examples are just to show that they're not always on your planned path, but you have to take the things that are in front of you and make those into opportunities to learn about what you can do better, and to actually make improvements for the business as they come. And so that over time, I've been doing those projects, and that's given me, and I've gotten more responsibility over time.
So it sounds a lot of it was just about tackling a problem that was impacting the function or the team or the business. So I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. But if you zoom out and just think about now that you are an op, even though you accidentally fell into that operations role, how do you think about the importance of that skill set as a legal leader, as somebody who's running the function, as someone who's contributing to the business? Why is that ability to think in that operational way, bring technology into the business important? What's the impact?
I think you see that as legal departments and companies get bigger, the processes just don't run smoothly anymore. So we are Dun& Bradstreet. For those who don't know, it's a business data and analytics company. We've been around for 180 years. That's a good thing in terms of our marketplace awareness, but it's a bad thing in terms of the legacy systems and processes and the contract debt, all the words you can think of to cover many decades of information. That complexity is something that has to be reined in. And I think each discipline within our legal department, they're experts at what they do. We have contracts leaders who know what they're doing. We have litigation experts who are masters at sort of the strategy of managing both proactive and defensive litigation. We have our compliance team, a growing team of experts who are expert at regulatory awareness and making sure that Dun & Bradstreet is a data company and with a lot of personal data, that they're on top of everything that needs to happen for us to launch new products in different areas. But tying it all together and making sure those processes work with our business, that's the role of the legal operations professional, in my view. And that skill doesn't always come naturally to the sort of career litigation lawyers or the career regulatory lawyers. It's about leaning into the technology. But what I found is it's a combination of openness to technology as a solution, but also, I think more importantly, it's about the relationships that you build with both your legal colleagues, the leaders of those other disciplines, to understand what they're looking for, and the business leaders, right? You need to, in order to be a legal ops person, I think you need to be really good at talking to people about what their core problems are that they're looking to solve, and then to also think creatively about how technology can be used to solve those problems.
Awesome. Thank you for that. They didn't come into the business as a legal ops person. They've grown into that role over time as part of their leadership. Also, if there are other recommended resources, obviously IHC is a great one. But if you've come across any fantastic resources or have additional advice for how people who accidentally find themselves in those legal ops roles or really want to embrace that aspect of their job can learn, please share that. Okay. And then here's a quick poll for the group. How are you currently managing legal operations? Are you in a situation where you've got a legal leader with a hybrid role like Bob? Do you have dedicated legal ops staff? Is your IT or corporate operations department running the show in that sense? Is it shared or is it just an informal approach at this point? And I think we'll probably see a lot of differences across the group. Lots of informal approach is leading the way right now. But as Bob said, as you grow, as you find that you need structure, one of the most common things we hear at LawView is now people can go on vacation and their work doesn't just fall through the cracks, little things like that. So what are the problems that you want to solve?
Yeah, no, I was just looking at the poll as well. Like in some ways, not having a formal approach, shared responsibilities, and hybrid role. I mean, those together are making up really the majority. So it looks like dedicated legal operations is the minority. And I think that's changing. And I'm going to say things that I think the people in legal operations know really well, but it feels to me like I'm surprised because when I talk to my colleagues, including some of the senior leaders around the company, they're not as familiar with legal operations as this discipline. But meanwhile, those who are getting into it or closer to it will say, no, it's everywhere and it's been around for 15 years or more. And so I think we're probably starting to hit that turning point where I think the importance of a legal operations function is becoming really clear.
For you, I don't know, Bob, have you hired or is that something that's in your plan? I know you're playing that role, of course, as the leader and have, like you said, found your way into it. But do you have a dedicated legal ops role now outside of yours?
We do not have a dedicated legal ops team at this moment. I'd like to say I'm pushing for that and we'll see what happens.
Do you feel like there's an inflection point? Like you said, I think it is more common. At LawView, we see customers with dedicated legal operations roles in very small teams, very large teams, but some large teams without, et cetera. What's the right time to start as early as possible? Is there an inflection point that you recognized?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the answer is going to vary for every company. I think of privacy by design. I think of legal ops by design is probably a great way to think about it. If you're a single lawyer at a company, you're going to be playing a hybrid role. You're going to be wearing all of those hats. But I think the design mentality of making sure that you're building your systems and your processes in a way that can scale is something that should happen for the smallest company on the smallest legal department. So I think it should be part of every lawyer's toolbook or every in-house lawyer's toolbox. Toolbook, that's nothing, not a thing. But yeah, so I don't know that there's any specific number of lawyers or size of legal department or size of company. I think that it will grow as your needs grow and the company's needs grow, but it should probably always be part of the planning and the design.
Well, I think we'll just start using the word toolbook too. So I like it. Okay, moving on. Definitely love to get any additional suggestions in the chat. And I do see a couple questions which we'll pop over to in a bit. So we'll just hone in now for the next a little while on matter management and technology. So Bob, tell us what the situation was. You've talked about it already a little bit, but what was the situation when you started that formal process of looking for a matter management solution? What problem were you trying to solve?
Absolutely. So this was shortly after Dun & Bradstreet was acquired in 2020. Our new general counsel said he wanted more visibility into the work that was being done, more metrics, and the ability to hopefully use those metrics to establish KPIs and SLAs. So what we had in place was basically a document management system. And that document management system was limited to North America. And the use was very inconsistent. You had some power users who completely relied on that system for all the work they did. And then you had other members of the legal department who really weren't aware of it or weren't using it at all. And it wasn't consistently used either. There weren't naming conventions or filing and folder conventions. And so there was a whole bunch of documents, but they weren't organized in a way that was meaningful to people to look back on. And so the goal was really to go from that state to a state where we could identify who was working on what when those matters happened, what were the conclusions from those matters, what were the learnings from those matters, how much time were people spending on matters, what was driving our resources, what parts of the business were driving the most legal resources. And so we knew at that point that we needed a much more powerful tool to manage all of that ability.
Awesome. And there's a couple questions about specific metrics in the chat. I'll just acknowledge that. We'll get to, Bob's going to talk a bit about how the data they are collecting and reporting. And obviously that was a big goal headed into looking for a matter management solution. Quick poll, and we'll just leave this one up and move on to the next slide while you answer it. How does your team currently manage workloads? So a lot of you we know don't have a formal legal ops role. What are you doing to manage your workload overall? So contract management solution, matter management solution, the legal tech market has lots of options for you. E-billing, matter management, intake and ticketing, unified solution, lots of folks using, looks like the majority of people using spreadsheets, Microsoft, email folders. As Bob said, that's how he started out solving some of the problems for the team. So not an uncommon response set. One of the things that we find here at LawView is when people start looking for solutions, it is really important, as you said, to articulate the problems that you want to solve. But sometimes the term matter management or matter management technology can be a little bit confusing. It's not always clear when teams start out, but it's important to think about how do you define what matter management means to the team. But how do you think about that at Dun & Bradstreet, Bob?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think this project, when we ultimately decided to go with LawView as our matter management provider, we had an idea of what we thought matters meant, but that understanding evolved over time. So this was a great opportunity for us to really refine what we mean and to look at that structure across our global legal department. The way we've landed, and I say landed loosely because I do think this evolves pretty regularly, but the way we've landed is that we have matters that are based on categories that cover who we are supporting in the business. So we have customer contracts as a category, We have complaints and disputes as a category. We have vendor contracts and IP matters. So those are different categories of matters. We also have regional hierarchies. Since we operate in multiple countries, we have a team in India and China and Europe, as well as North America. We wanted to make sure that there was an ability to customize the matters across those different regions. And also for intake and legal queue purposes, we wanted to make sure that a North American customer contract was different than a European customer contract. And even within Europe, it's actually broken into different regions. So every company is going to be different. And we came to this structure over time and with a little bit of trial and error. But we've now found that the two approaches, both categories, but then regions, works very well for us.
Yeah, and I think if you zoom out, it's a pretty broad definition of what a matter is, right? Not just the traditional litigation matter or something like that, which some people are thinking about, but it's all the legal work. And the reason I know you can't read all the details here, but what's on the screen is, of course, that not just your hierarchy, but some of the data that you're getting out of the system now, right? And I know you're going to talk to us a bit more about how you're using the data, but we can see that ability to report and track work based on who the work is being done for regionally, the type of work, all of that, be able to identify bottlenecks in particular aspects of the system or what have you, is really what you're getting out of having that quite broad definition of what constitutes a matter for your team.
Yeah, I think you're showing some of the reporting that where we can use the ability to have some consistency globally allows us to create reporting that allows us to compare things globally, to compare across regions. Our legal teams have asked for, so they show the first one there, it says week beginning. Those are about how much new work is coming in each week and where is it coming from and what are the matter types. And then you can also see not only what new matters have come in, but the dashboard below that is showing which ones are actively being worked on. And so that gives you a view of not just, you may have a matter that sat dormant for 3 months, but if there's now activity, you can use the data within LawView and the metadata about tracking status updates to then show that these are the matters that are actively being worked on. And so knowing what types of matters are actively being worked on and which team members are engaged in those, you can start to see exactly, like you said, Ashley, about where there are bottlenecks, where you might need more resources, where you're seeing trends in terms of work over time to plan ahead for what you'll need in the future in terms of legal support.
And I think one thing that we see at LawView that's really interesting is a lot of folks come knocking on the door for contract management solutions, which is great. CLMs are a really useful tool, and the business is, of course, all about the contracts. But when you look at this, so much of the legal work is not just contracts, right? There's lots of other stuff that has to happen. And I think that's one of the key things to think about if you're thinking about technology is, what do you need as a legal team? Because some of the solutions can be more limiting. They solve different problems. Those problems may be really most important to you, but matter management is broadly underrepresented. It's got a lower rate of adoption than a lot of other legal technology, which is very interesting because it's such an important way to manage your entire workload. So I think that's something we can also see from these examples. So thanks for sending them.
I can also just say one additional point there about contract management. You can have a hybrid approach. And at Dun & Bradstreet right now, we use LawView to manage contracts. Some contracts work depending on the region. We use the matter management module of LawView to manage some contracts work, and that works. We are using that to manage one division of Dun & Bradstreet that is an acquisition that operates more independently than the larger organization. And so many of the processes are kept in place. And so this was an opportunity to say, let's do a better job at managing contracts for this one division, really more fit for purpose features of LawView's contract management tool to manage just that one division. But we also have a contract management tool that is not LawView that we use for a big segment of our business. And we have to balance using a contract management tool for certain types of contracts along with a matter management tool for other types of contracts. And it's not always easy to discern exactly which direction to go, but I think we are doing our best to manage all the different types of work that come into the legal department globally in the best way. And that's not always going to be the exact same way. We have different solutions for different business areas and business units, and that's worked for us.
Yeah, I feel like that hybrid approach could be its own whole webinar. I don't know what term to use, but somebody put something in the chat. We have a problem of tracking because it increases administrative burden for the legal team if there's a matter or a request that comes in that it can just be turned around quite quickly. How do you approach that with your team? Do you try to get everything into LawView, or are there some things you don't worry about?
So that's a great question. This may be controversial, but we have set up a field that we call time spent that we fill out at the end of working on a matter. That field goes down to 15 minutes in increments. I hesitate because I don't want people to think this is like law firm days of tracking your hours in 6-minute increments. It's really meant to be an estimate that we use at the end of working on a matter. It takes 1 second to check the box and say, was it 15 minutes, 30 minutes? But it gives us a very high level but quick sense of the types of work that are taking the most time. So in terms of administrative burden, we have a business portal set up. So in terms of creating a matter, that actually happens by the business person who is requesting support. LawView creates the matter, and then we have an assignment coordinator, someone who sees that come into the intake queue, assigns it to a person, that person works on it. So the person who works on it doesn't have that much of an administrative burden of working within the matter structure. In fact, it is, once you get used to it, and once our business team gets used to it, it is more efficient. You can avoid email. You can use the kind of the files within LawView. You're doing all of the work in one place, and so it becomes more efficient, even for a matter that you've only worked on for half an hour. And we have a lot of those, and because we have small contracts, review an amendment and approve it. So I think you can manage the administrative burden through having a business portal where business users do a lot of the work of setting up the basic details of each matter.
I just jumped ahead to one of the slides that we'd prepped so that folks can see that. This isn't Bob's business portal. He'll also talk about that a little bit more, but this is our demo one from LawView. So one aspect of the technology is having that option to create that legal front door where people come in and submit those structured requests, and then it lands in an intake queue so the team can decide how they want to handle it. And that, as Bob said, gives you the advantage of capturing the data, but not putting all of the administrative burden. Another really popular feature that we see that I think Bob will talk about a bit more too is email integrations, right? So you get an email request, you just pop that into LawView through an add-on from your email. It's also a good segue. So Bob, just talk a little bit more about the key workflows that you started with. I know these are things that you really needed to solve for early on with the technology that have really taken root and embedded. So do you want to talk a bit more about these key workflow optimizations that you started with?
Sure. So the first one, intellectual property intake and pipeline tracking. We have, Dun & Bradstreet has a robust trademark and patent portfolio. We are filing for new patents and new trademarks regularly. We have used LawView now to really simplify that process of requesting a new trademark or providing an inventor disclosure form for a new patent. And then we can track both of those intakes through their life cycle. So for a patent, it might be we're in the review phase, or we've actually filed a provisional patent application, or maybe now it's in the non-provisional stage. So we're actually tracking the life cycle of our patent portfolio in a way that our business team really wanted to see. Our technology leaders are incentivizing their own teams to file for patents, and that's great. That's what we are hoping they will do. And so they want to see quickly, how did we do? How are we doing relative to prior years? So by tracking all of the new intakes and by managing the stages of those new trademarks and new patents, we can show how we're doing this year relative to last year in terms of each stage of that process. So that's been a really important and relatively simple process to set up. You create the matter form, you figure out what fields you need, and then from there, it's just about using the right reporting tool to be able to show the differences over time. So I alluded to this a few minutes ago. Dun & Bradstreet acquired a digital audience solutions data provider. So basically the data that allows digital marketing to be focused on the right audience. That business is run independently, not completely independently, but it's a different type of business than Dun & Bradstreet's core business. So a lot of the processes haven't been changed, haven't been integrated into the larger D&B structure. So one of those aspects is that they continue to use outside counsel to manage their commercial contracts work. And they're a great firm. They do great work for us, but we also wanted to understand that work better. We wanted to be able to see what types of work our outside counsel was working on and start to understand that work with the idea that we should be looking to do some of that work ourselves over time. So by using LawView as the intake process for that division, we now get to choose. We pick and choose which matters will continue to go to outside counsel, which matters we can handle in-house, and we can learn at our own pace. And we can also get a much better sense of exactly the type of work our outside counsel was doing and be able to make decisions from there. And that's also the business unit that we are using the contract management module of LawView for. And so it's helped us to learn that tool and also streamline that business where people were using essentially templates on their desktops to manage their work. And I think we've now been able to update forms and make sure everyone's using the right contracts to start with, which is a huge step for a small division. The third one, standardized task and status tracking for litigation. So we have a litigation team. They have a heavy burden of managing all of the steps that are required whenever you get some sort of complaint or whenever we are proactively filing claims against others. And the number of steps is burdensome if you don't have a meaningful way to track where you are in those steps. And so what we did is we created matter types for our litigation team. Those have an automated task list that populates every time you create one of those new matters. And that team is able to check those tasks off along with who completed the task, and the system knows when it was completed. And so by having the list of tasks and just checking a box for whether it's completed, you have this very easy way of tracking exactly where you are in any one of those litigations at any time. And it's managed in a standardized way across all of our litigation.
We're using lots of the functionality of the technology to solve different problems. I'll jump ahead to data, but just acknowledging Bob's talked about a lot of automations, not necessarily the fanciest of automations, as we talked about, where everything is no touch for the team, but just that process of setting up better, more streamlined intake, automating reporting is something he'll talk about right now, task lists. Those are all things that are really creating efficiency and standardizing the way the team works. But I know a lot of people are, of course, very interested in the data and metric side, and it was a big goal of adoption for you all. So what on the screen here are some of the out-of-the-box dashboards that LawView provides. So an example of our general counsel dashboard, out-of-the-box matter dashboards. We also have what we call matter grids, which let people slice and dice and export data. But something else that Bob and team are doing is they've also automated a generation of data into their Power BI platform. So the LawView data goes into Power BI, and those are the reporting that they're using more day to day. So Bob, can you just talk to us about what are you doing with the data? A couple of people have put questions in about KPIs, things like that. So let's chat data.
Yeah, I've talked a little bit about two of these dashboards already. But so what we have with LawView is the Insights Connect, but it's essentially the API of all of the metadata from LawView that allows us to sync into Power BI without any sort of manual intervention. You set it up, the data flows in every night, and once you have your formats of your reports set up, these dashboards just update automatically every day. I've talked about a couple of them. Again, we're using all the metadata. So some of it is as basic as just the matter types, and you can look at it week by week and see how many new matters are you getting you can look at it by region, you can look at it by matter type. You can also look at the status updates for those matters. The middle one there, that's one people ask for turnaround time. I think anyone in a contracts role and most people in an in-house legal role are asked for turnaround time and SLAs. Those have always been very difficult for me to wrap my arms around. This approach, essentially, it uses the features of LawView about when a matter is opened and when a matter is closed. And you can use that metadata, come up with a basic turnaround time. I'll say there are limitations to that though, right? There may be a pause that you're waiting for someone else to provide input. You may have sent something to a third party and you're waiting for them to hear back. And so you might not have completed the matter. And so your legal team turnaround time is not necessarily recorded by this particular dashboard. It's really the overall turnaround time or an average turnaround time for each matter. That said, I think it's useful. I think it helps. If you know that the average time from start to finish for a certain type of matter is 3 days or 5 days, you can use that to tell people that's our average turnaround time, or that's the average just time to complete that type of matter. So I do think this data is helpful, even though it doesn't solve every problem of like how much actual time is the legal team taking to just respond to maybe the initial request that comes in.
Makes sense. And yeah, do you want to speak a little bit? Baselines are rare when people come to LawView. So those perfect KPIs of improvement over time, or we're here now and we want to be there, are often not where people start. And it sounds like that's true for you all. There's a poll that has just been popped up around level of maturity with analytics. This is based on the ACC maturity levels, in case anyone's interested. Definitely encourage folks to put into the chat, what KPIs are you tracking? What are you sharing with the business? So Bob, these dashboards, it looks like to me, represent a combination of, these are things that we use data for to optimize and manage within the legal team. And then there's some things that really are most important for the business leadership on a fair summary?
Yeah, I think we are using these reports to show the breadth and depth of what the legal team works on. And sometimes you just need stats, right? Not everyone is the leader of each discipline or outside of legal, they're not necessarily going to dive deeply into all of your dashboards. But at a high level, if you can tell them that there are 8,000 legal matters that come in each year, which was one of the stats that we have, they can appreciate why the legal department is the size that it is and why we might need more resources. And you can certainly break that down even more by function and discipline.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier that ability to figure out, how do we use this to resource properly? How do we use it to plan? Cool. Definitely we can come back to some data stuff as we go, as it makes sense, because I know it's a hot topic. We really wanted to devote most of this time to listening to Bob talk about how they've approached what they've achieved, what they're doing with the technology. But quickly, for the audience, for those who are looking for matter management technology, can you just talk about, how did you approach getting a solution? What was your process like? How did you engage stakeholders? What worked? What did you learn from that process?
Yeah, so I'll be transparent here that in this case, I don't think we followed the traditional playbook for managing different vendors. We had a high level goal from our general counsel about visibility into matters. We looked at our incumbent, the document management solution. We tried to see, do they have something that we could upgrade to? At that point, we didn't think that we could. We received an email, so kudos to the marketing team at LawView for reaching out, or I think I might have seen it in a white paper. So somehow I heard about it, we looked into it, we immediately liked it, we got a demo. We also then said, we need to compare this. So we did look at other matter management tools. That was our focus at the time, was matter management. So we did look at a few others, but we really did like LawView. Tell you that I had a checklist of features and requirements that we did a detailed RFP, and LawView satisfied those better than others. We liked what we saw. And once we decided that we liked it, that was where we decided we need to get other stakeholders involved. So as we were still evaluating, or pre-contract at this point, we did get our other legal leaders to sit in on the demos and ask questions directly to LawView. So you want people involved early. You want your users and your leaders who will be using the outputs of these tools to be involved as early as possible, so that they have an ownership of the solution, but also so that you actually flush out what are the real issues. So we had people sit in, our litigation leader, our regulatory and compliance leader, they sat in on demos and they asked questions as they had things that they wanted to make sure LawView would solve. We worked with the LawView team to make sure that LawView could solve those problems. That was our goals were visibility and metrics. We thought that LawView could handle that. And so we decided to do a small proof of concept. We knew we had moved quickly and we liked moving quickly, but we also knew that we didn't necessarily want to make a department-changing investment before we knew if the solution would work. We did a proof of concept just for my team at the time, which was a contracts team of 7 people at that time in North America. We learned how the tool worked. We made sure we worked out some of the kinks, and then we gradually rolled it out to other parts of the legal team and the business at large. By doing it in a phased approach, we were able to learn from our mistakes in the process and also make sure that we were incorporating feedback of everyone who was using it along the way.
Nice. So it sounds like you didn't go in, like you said, with a checklist of specific features, but what did you find along the way became features that were really essential? Maybe they were on the list originally, but maybe you've also said there are some things along the way you realized would be really important and valuable. So can you just talk a little bit about some of the key features that you think people should be looking for?
Sure. So we were evolving away from a document management system. It was a document management system that did a good job of search, right? You could search and you could find, at least with a couple of criteria, you might be able to find your document. And what was a key piece. So being able to find the documents was key to, especially our litigation team, the teams that have to manage issues that relate to things that happened 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We knew that document management and searchability was key. So that was one of the things that we tested before we ended up doing the proof of concept. We did various scenarios to try to hide the word in a document so that we could see how powerful was the search. And we realized that it is powerful. And especially once you have the matter structure around it, you're able to hone in much more quickly than in a document management system when you just have tens of thousands of documents sitting there without any metadata. So that was key for us. The self-configuration and management, we know that things change very rapidly for our legal team and the environment. And so we know that we were going to make mistakes in how we set this up. And so the ability for us to configure the tools ourselves and to learn how to be the administrator of this tool and to make changes real time has been enormous. When I have a call with somebody else on the team and they tell me that there's a problem, I can go into the settings and fix that problem while they're on the phone. And that's, I think, a different experience than most people have. And I think it's been really helpful for us. Ashley, you mentioned email integration through Outlook before. That's huge. Lawyers work in email still. We're trying to push people to use LawView's conversation features, but there's still quite a few people who will be using email exclusively. And so by having the integration with LawView right in Outlook and the ability to click a button, file it, not only file the email you've just sent or that you've just received, but also to file any email in that string without additional effort. So you say, this is a string that has 45 replies on it. You can just hit it once and that email and all of its replies have been saved along with the metadata for all of those 45 emails, including their attachments. So it's a pretty powerful feature and a way to use LawView when you're working with stakeholders who aren't necessarily directly in the tool like we are in legal. And then the last feature, the reporting for individual views. Again, Ashley, you mentioned that's the grid view in LawView where you can set it up depending on the team you're in, depending on the type of work that you do. You can set up a view that is essentially your homepage. Here are the matter types that you've set up for yourself. So you can quickly click into the view that is appropriate or that you're working on that day, and you'll see exactly the information on those matters that you've asked LawView to provide in that view. If you set those views up once, then you don't need to do it anymore. It's just there when you log in.
Nice. I'm going to jump ahead because we have talked about how you approach the implementation as a rolling roll-up phase. How do you successfully engage the team? How do you successfully drive adoption around the business? So we've nested that under this idea of getting the most out of your solution. So just key takeaways in terms of driving adoption and driving value. What recommendations do you have for people so they can make sure they're getting the ROI? We also saw some stuff in the chat about failed implementations of CLMs. So what's worked well for you in terms of getting that adoption and buy-in across the business and with your legal team?
Yeah, so I mentioned this already, as you said, like starting with the small proof of concept was helpful because that way we were able to work out a lot of the kinks up front. But another big point is to involve your users, the people who you're asking to use this tool, involve them as early as you possibly can. Involve them in the design stage, both your legal team who will be using the tool and your business users. Get them to participate in the design and the configuration. And that by doing that, you create a sense of ownership and sort of a shared responsibility. If this doesn't work, it's not just the legal team who screwed it up. It's we as a team are responsible now for making sure this works in the optimal way. So getting people involved before you launch it, right? So don't just say, here it is. We spent the last 3 months building this tool, and tomorrow you're going to start using it. And here's a video. You have to actually talk to those people as you're designing and get them invested as early as you can. You're not going to have, we have 6,000 employees at Dun & Bradstreet. You're not going to be able to engage with all of them before you roll something out. So you do have to create materials. You have to create training materials. We have a video. We have a PowerPoint. You don't want to overwhelm people with training, but you want to have the basics available. And you want to be able to point people quickly and easily to that training. So what we did was we created an auto reply to our legal mailbox that said, we're no longer using the legal mailbox. Click here for a video on how to use LawView. And that was an auto reply. It automatically showed people how to find the resources that would help them use this new tool. We didn't think we had the resources to do that. So we created these materials and we just made them easily accessible to every new user of the tool.
So just following up on that quickly, how are people benefiting from LawView? So if you think about personas across the business, what's in it for the GC? What is your department getting out of it? Now that it's embedded and established and you did that pushing, how is the business thinking about it? Yeah, how's it going across the business?
I think we are in different stages in different regions. I mentioned that we started small. We went to North America. We've launched in Europe. We've launched in India. We're thinking about launching in China. So the answer isn't going to be the same in every place, but I think that our experience in each of those rollouts has given us just a lot to make each rollout better. In terms of personas, the general counsel, I think I meant to mention this earlier when you were asking about adoption and how do you incentivize adoption. One of the key things is having that C-level sponsorship. So our general counsel, our deputy general counsel, both of those people have been really supportive of the use of this across the legal department and within the business. And by having the top of the organization say, this is how we want to manage things, that helps everyone to understand that it's a shared vision and it's maybe not an optional work process improvement. So that really helps. But the GC has been, I think, pleased with the results. The goals, again, were visibility and metrics. The visibility, you've seen some of it in those dashboards. We have the ability now to see how things have been going for now. I mean, we launched in 2022, so I'll call it 2 full years, 23 and 24 of data. Even if we haven't established our KPIs and SLAs for every part of the business, the data is there for us to look at when people are ready, because it's sitting in there, and now we just have to look at it more closely when there's a person asking about it. And so that's everyone, all of your vendors will ask, what's your baseline? And in the past, I've really not been able to answer that question. Now I think I could, once I know, okay, this is what we're focusing on. This is the region. Let's look. And we have some of those baseline metrics. In terms of other personas, it's a constant process of meeting with the other legal discipline leaders. So I mentioned litigation, regulatory, and compliance. We have worked with those leaders to give them the insights that they're looking for. I think you're never done and it's never going to be perfect. So you got to set up ongoing meetings to make sure you're doing the right thing for every team. In terms of day-to-day users, you had mentioned this before about people going on vacation. I do think that there's a lot of value in having the shared repository that shows the status of what you're working on, the files that are relevant to that matter. And if you need someone to step in, they join that matter and they have the ability to get up to date very quickly. So I think that's been helpful for both legal users and the business users who our sales teams might be stepping in. The accounts change, and this way they can see the amendment history of a contract or some of the other issues that have come up with a particular customer. So having that historical view into the legal work for both legal users and business users has been, I think, really well received.
Great. Thanks for that. And I've just put into the chat, just pop any final questions in. I know we're running out of time here. Bob, what are we seeing on the screen?
Yeah, so I mentioned before that we had created a couple of different training materials. This is just the front page of one of those. We try to make it relatively easy. When we have an auto reply to the email that someone sends to an inbox, they'll receive a link to this training. As you can see, it's broken up into 8 or so categories, just meant to give people the basics. So the idea is just have some training available so that you don't have to have ongoing live trainings or necessarily walk individual people through how to use the tool. If you spend a little bit of time on creating that collateral up front, you'll have a much more efficient rollout. And we've used essentially the same training materials for each rollout as we've expanded regions and functions.
Awesome. Yeah, and there was a bit of an aha moment in the chat that idea that you had of replying to emails going, here's how we do this now. Watch our video was just a really great way because you just have to keep getting people. And then there were a number of comments about the change management. So as we wrap, this is what Bob told me the benefits of better management have been. Bob, anything you want to, I'm going to throw a poll up as well, final poll here for the group about what success metrics would you be looking for? How would you evaluate improvements? What would you be looking for to measure whether your technology implementation has been successful or your changes in matter management approach have been successful?
Yeah, I think I've talked about all of these throughout, but business continuity is the idea that anyone can step in, that you have this history of the work that we've done in the past. One of the things that Dun & Bradstreet did was we cut off email retention after 2 years. Now for documents or for discovery and purposes and e-discovery, it's good to cut off the email, but for business continuity and for lawyers who are looking to make sure they can look up what happened in an issue that happened 5 years ago, that's tricky. So business continuity, the ability to store all this data and keep it over time, that's an intangible benefit. Sometimes it's hard to measure that in real time. Like how many times did I go into LawView to find something that was older than 3 years old? We're not measuring that, but we know that value is there. The visibility, again, across the team. We're a global team. We're dispersed. It's nice to be able to see what people are working on, how much work is happening in different areas, and to see how that trends over time. And efficiency, I do think that by creating some structure, creating intake forms, creating task templates, you structure the work. It allows people to get what they need faster and to return the results faster.
Yeah, it looks like efficiency is the leader of the success metrics from the poll so far, but followed closely by visibility and the ability to standardize work. Just jumping ahead, I think we've answered most of the questions as they've come up. Thanks a lot for fielding those as we go. Bob, obviously at LawView, we would love to connect with you if you want to ask more questions. The In-House Connect group has a lot of great webinars that you can also learn from, and we will be sending out the slides along with these resources. There are these resources and lots of other ones out there for you all. If you've got any final questions for us, please throw those in the chat. Shai, anything you want to say before we close out?
Yeah, I just want to, first of all, thank you, Ashley and Bob, for a wonderful session. Tons of great practical tips. I want to thank the Chat IHC for always delivering great engagement and advice and participation. It's really a pleasure. I want to kick it back to you and Bob for final remarks. So why don't I start with Bob, and then we'll go to Ashley, and then we'll sign off on this lovely cold Thursday.
I'll just say a few things. Thanks again for having me. It wouldn't be a legal operations webinar if someone didn't say AI. So I guess I'll say what's next is really leaning into some of the AI features of LawView. We also have AI opportunities outside of LawView with knowledge management and contract management and AI assisted review. I think we're in the early stages of exploring going to utilize AI, but it's exciting. I think by having that foundation in LawView, I think we're ripe to be able to utilize AI features on top of that. And so I'm excited for what that's going to look like in 2025.
Awesome. And I put a couple of Bob's top tips. I did ask him to give us 2 to close off with. So I'll just leave that as my closing remark. Obviously, at LawView, we're really keen to speak with you and learn what your problems are around matter management, contract management, et cetera. Someone did ask in the chat earlier, is LawView a matter management solution or a CLM? So I'll just clarify that. Yes, both, but matter management is the core of our legal workspace. So you have the option to add a CLM, as Bob was talking about earlier, but every LawView customer starts with our matter management module, so to speak. Yeah, get in touch if you want to chat and learn more about the solution. But it's really great to see all the engagement and appreciate all of you giving your advice and answering questions. And thank you so much, Bob, for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you. All right. Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
We're going to wrap up here. Have a wonderful Thursday, a great weekend. To my Houston people, I look forward to seeing you later. Miami people, I'll see you next week, and have a great week. Take care, everybody.